Boom. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to discover how to leverage consumer insights to craft price strategies that not only resonate with customers, but drive significant profitability. Let's get this one started. Here we go.
Shut up and sit down.
Look, a business can give you everything you want in life: prestige, wealth, freedom. It can also take everything away from you. This show is for those who are willing to take that risk. These are the real life stories of entrepreneurs. But before we start, I have one small favor to ask. Please leave a comment. It can be advice, critiques, tips, feedback, or share this with someone because your engagement is the most valuable and most powerful form of social currency. So thank you, and welcome to another episode of Business Bros. All right, business bros, with decades of expertise across technology, consumer products, and e-commerce, our guest has mastered the art of aligning pricing and product strategies with customer value. From leading Maple Street advisors to pioneering growth methodologies that connect C-suite leaders with revenue innovators, his approach consistently boosts profitability and aligns business operations with private equity expectations. So whether you're looking to enhance top-line growth or elevate your EBITDA, right? Earnings, and accounting term. Anyways, Pat's insights are your key to unlocking the business potential. Let's welcome to the show, Mr. Pat Meegan. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, all that stuff, right?
Yep. Dirty way to say profitability. Yep.
There you go. A fancy way to say profitability. Pat, thank you for jumping on here with me today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right, man. First question I always ask everybody who comes on the show is here to promote something, sell something. There's something that you do for a living, something that you're trying to get out to the public. What is that for you?
Yeah, it's services to enable businesses to claim the value that they provide to the market through pricing. A lot of people offer a ton of value. They don't, and a lot of times they're shy on pricing. I'm here to help people actually get the value they're worth.
All right, let's cut to the chase here. I already know how most of us operate because I've done it the same way myself. The way it usually works is we decide we have a business, product or service. We want to figure out how to price it. So we go to the market, we see what's already priced, and then we just undercut it a little bit to, be competitive. Are we doing it wrong?
Yeah, it's really common. So I work with a lot of founders. I've worked with founders, over many years. That is exactly the most typical approach that I see. The issue there is what we often see is you'll see where you're offering, it's at the same time the founder was saying, hey, we think we're better than everybody else, but then they'll price a little bit below the average. So in reality, if you think you're worth it, you should be able to take your pricing up and be able to actually claim that value. And so you should be thinking about pricing not just as a one-time thing, but as it should be part of your positioning. If you're better, if you're at the average, then your pricing should be somewhere in the average. If you're better than average, it should be somewhere north of that.
All right. There's something that I feel is kind of important there. And it has to do with perspective, right? What you, I'll give you a story. I heard this story a long time ago. A guy needs help. His business is going under, calls a technician comes over, looks at the problem, hits two buttons, click, solves the problem, sends him an invoice for $1,000. Guy looks at it, he's like, you were here, you charged me $1,000, took you like 1 minute. I don't understand the pricing. He comes back, he's like, look, I'm charging you $1 to flip the switch. I'm charging you $999 to know which switch to flip, right? And that is an example of like perceived value. The value to the customer is always different than the value that the business owner might feel or think they have. Can you explain that perceived value and why it's so important with pricing?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good example too. So for instance, in that example, ultimately what the person's buying is the outcome, right? They want that successful outcome. And if they're saying, hey, it only took you 5 minutes, I should be paying for your time, then that business owner probably hasn't framed up the value they deliver very well, right? So perceived value is all about the buyer understanding the value in the context of what they're trying to generate or what the benefit they're trying to get. So oftentimes you'll see professional services folks will charge by the hour. Well, not every hour is created the same. You might help somebody double their business in an hour. And does that seem like a fair remuneration for that value? No. So you need to think about, okay, should I be charging? What's the basis of the unit of value that makes sense for my business? If it is an hour, it could make sense, but then you'd have to look at it pretty hard and say, is there a better way to align the value I deliver to a client or a customer with the way that I charge? And usually there's going to be something better, because people are trying to buy outcomes. They're not just trying to buy your time. And so often the seller of their time is the one who undervalues what they do versus the buyer.
That's a big difference, though, and I've heard this saying over and over again. But people who are successful in business sell the result, sell the outcome, and the people who are not successful in business exchange their time for money. You heard Robert Kiyosaki talk about how the rich don't work for money. I remember reading that at like 18, 19 years old and thinking, well, what the hell are you doing? I didn't quite understand that. You think that's a huge mindset shift that you have to work with when you talk to clients that have that perceive or that different value point where they're thinking, I need to exchange more time for money. If I could just bill more hours, I'll make more money, versus focusing on that result, that outcome?
Yeah, absolutely. It's right. If you think about it, if you just do the math, if you look at how many hours you have in a year, quickly you're going to realize that you only have so many you can provide to the market. So it's going to cap your potential. But going back to your earlier question about perceived value, that perceived value lives in the mind of the buyer. So when you go to price and you go to value your offerings, you need to think about it from the perspective of those who are going to consume your value. And so, rather than having the conversation of, okay, where is everybody else and what's everybody doing that's currently in the market, is there a way for my new offering to be positioned differently that allows it to claim greater value than what others are doing? If so, like, how does a buyer think about that? And in some cases, if you're talking to, we use a variety of different examples here, but if you're talking to a bank, the ability to reduce risk and save them enormous amounts of money is something that's really valuable to them. And you could easily say, if you sell the same software to a bank versus a retailer or a small business, you could say, well, they're all getting the same benefit, but actually they're not. The ability to avoid certain risks or to get more value can be different by different segments of your market. So you need to be thinking about that in terms of, even if my offering looks the same, am I delivering different value in different ways? It all goes back to understanding the perception of value from the mind of the buyer. And that's where you're going to unlock some of those big gains for your business versus trying to think about everything as an input type of an approach, like an hourly basis.
Let's talk about those big gains. I feel that there are a lot of companies who do really good work, really quality service, really customer oriented, and they struggle to break that $1 million revenue thing. And it usually has something to do with their processes or procedures. But at the same time, in order for you to implement some of those processes and procedures, you need to have the cash flow coming in to bring in good team players, to implement some of these processes and softwares. And the margins just aren't there for a lot of people. How can pricing and properly pricing help generate the margins necessary for a company to really take it to that next level and scale?
Yeah, it's a really important question. So I spent a number of years consulting with small business owners, startups, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and this came up frequently. One of the things that I've seen consistently with that group, as well as PE-backed, $100 million companies and whatnot, is neither one of them spends nearly as much time thinking about pricing and how they should price and what they should be doing in terms of testing different ideas or bundling or packaging their offerings differently. You'll see a ton of time spent on trying to get the volume of orders up, but not how much each order is valued via price. And so I'd say one of the most important things you could do at any stage is make sure you're carving out time to say, am I pricing right? Are there different indicators I have that maybe I'm undervaluing something or overvaluing in some cases? And I'm cutting off some of my conversion rate because my pricing is too high? Or should I be thinking about how I'm delivering my offering differently so that I can generate more revenue than I currently do? It's literally the fact that companies rarely spend time thinking about pricing at all that limits them a lot on that side of the equation.
I know there are people who charge, 10x what the regular industry is charging. and it mainly has to do with how they're packaging the deliverables, right? So at the end of the day, most of the time, the deliverables that you're providing for your client, product, service, whatever it is, it's comparable to what other people are doing, and yet some people can charge 10x the amount, whereas other people are just charging that undercut, trying to race to the bottom when it comes to pricing. And some of those key things that allow them to charge 10x are also some of the key things that help them create or craft the offer in a way that people pay that. Can you kind of go over, pricing is one thing, but actually creating the offer so that the price is related to that perceived value? How do you kind of walk me through that? How do you present that to a client so they can see the value that the customer is getting, and at the same time not freak out about the deliverable that they have to provide?
Right, exactly. So if you think about it, pricing is an important element in positioning. Okay, so if you go to buy a watch and you say, okay, well, here's a watch, and it looks like a pretty good watch, and it's $100, and I see one next to it that's $250. Instantly, I start to think, well, why is that one worth so much more? And it starts to shift your thinking. Okay, so in your offering, be it a service, a product, whatever, how you position your product, and your price says a lot about how you're positioning yourself. So, for instance, you mentioned the 10x. The person who's able to sell similar services at 10x the value. Well, to be able to do that, they have to have the positioning to back that up, right? So, if I'm going to go out and say I'm 10x, more expensive, then there needs to be some things in terms of my mechanism for results delivery that's more effective than others, and I need to be able to back that up. Maybe I do something differently in terms of how I deliver my services, that it makes it so that the implementation is better, and I ride alongside and hold your hand and make sure you actually get the results versus just giving you good advice. There's different ways I've seen it positioned so that you take a different angle on how you solve the problem, and that opens up opportunities to not just price like everybody else. Because ultimately it serves you really well. There's a great book on this called Obviously Awesome by April Dunford, where she goes through and kind of breaks down positioning to your favor, and especially if you're if you're a challenger and not the market leader, and if solopreneurs typically are that, or they're inventing a new category. So you got to figure out how to help someone to think about what is the product category that you're competing in, or maybe you're changing the game, and now because you're changing the game and you're doing it differently, it costs more because you're going to get something better out of it. So that positioning and pricing, and then what is the offering, are pieces that should be getting a lot of time and attention. And there's also a piece like, once you launch it, then listen to the market. And I'm sure you and your listeners have seen this too. Is one of the big differences between those businesses that tend to stay around and those that flail is the inability to adjust in the short term, and to kind of figure out the right strategy. Rarely does someone have the first idea and it's like the ultimate idea they're going to be with doing that same thing forever. They're going to listen to market feedback and tweak it and adjust it. And that's a piece of not just the offering, but then how you value it through pricing and how you sell it and how it's structured.
How is always the biggest question, right? I think for the most part, we're like, okay, we have to price better. We understand that. We have to craft a better offer. We understand that. But I think we fall off when it comes to how do we get the information to create an offer that is compelling to our audience, to our customer avatar. You have a quantitative survey method that you use to determine some of those needs. Tell me a little bit about that, and how does it inform you as to the strategy that you're going to implement?
Yeah. So I'd say the quantitative surveys are an important part of getting insight where people are trading off between decisions, right? If I just asked you a list of 5 questions or listed 5 things and said, which of these sound interesting to you? You'd be like, there's no reason not to say, oh, I want all of those things. But if I then ask you, do you want A or do you want B? Which one do you want more? Or if I have C or B, or C or A, and then start to force you to make trade-offs, which of those are more valuable to you, then I really start to get insight into what people really need to solve their problem, or where they're getting more or less value. It also allows us so there's a number of different techniques that be used in a survey. Some of them also pair pricing with it. So for instance, rather than just say, how much should you price this thing? I'd rather have you respond to, here are 3 things. They have different features. There's maybe a different picture, and the pricing changes. And you're going to go through a series of tasks where you're going to answer that, and that helps me to then afterward, analyze the information and say, okay, well, I can see that people are trading off this color or this brand for price. And so that helps me understand that if I were to build more toward these things, I could claim more price. But on so those are like some really sophisticated advanced market research approaches. But if someone is just sitting there with, SurveyMonkey or Google Forms and wants to do some of this stuff, a lot of what it would take is going through and spending a little time just looking on online quantitative survey approaches. There's some questions out there about price sensitivity meters and things like that, where you can get some gauge on what it is people value versus other things. But what a survey does is allows you to get a large scale of responses versus just doing interviews. And interviews is another huge part of how I'm able to glean those insights, is talking to people. It could be customers, it could be people who are sellers in the market, other buyers in the market that aren't my clients. But you're kind of thinking through what are the different pieces of information I need, and then I'm going to try to gather that information through some different tactical approaches. But surveys ultimately is trying to find the right people, and then being able to get some different variables about who they are, what it is they value, and then also spending some time on the back end to do some analysis in Excel or other advanced tools to look at it and say, how can I split this out into different needs segments that allow me to charge prices or create products differently to people so that I can capture some more of the value they perceive.
Yeah, sometimes that overall product or service can be broken down into smaller components that you can offer up in different ways. Because I've always learned that you first get the attention that you're looking for, whether it's through organic content or paid ads or whatever it is. Your goal in that sense is not necessarily to make the sale right off the bat, but to collect customer data so that you have an ability to sell afterwards. Then that next step is to make the sale, and then after that, it's to continue to extract cash over and over again. And I think when you use the surveys that you're talking about, you create the different needs analysis, you know what your customers are looking for. You're able to break down your overall product maybe into smaller bundles where you're able to attract that customer to give you in exchange for name, email, phone number, something of value. You give the opportunity to sell them something, and then going on forward, you have the upsells continuously down the road. This is where big businesses actually operate. When you think of companies like Temu's or the Sheins or the Amazons of the world, they operate very much the same way. The first time it's like, hey, I got your attention with this product or service. Now let me hook you up with a coupon. I'll exchange that for name, email, phone number. After that, we can make the sale. And then you're going to continuously get stuff from me that I feel is valuable, that can help you in some way, where we continue to extract cash. I feel like when you're talking about your pricing strategy, it kind of lays out that entire process. And if people want to, and I know it's a little bit early for the plug, but if people want to find out about, getting to that point where they can look at their business from, I have no idea what I'm supposed to price it at, to now I have a complete strategy all the way through, how could they do that?
Well, you can reach out to us on maplestreet.com, but I think the way that you do that is that you would, so a lot of times companies will have a product strategy, and they're thinking about their product, and there's a lot of time spent there. But concurrent with that, you want to be thinking about, how do I monetize what it is I have? And so you have to have this monetization strategy that you're building out as well. So for instance, if I'm just thinking about product, this is something I see frequently, both in the in the consumer product space and also in the especially in the technology space, because you have this development team that's always building parts of your product and making it better and all of that. But what's often not asked is, which of these things actually allow us to charge more, or to be added on, or to be, to expand our customers' purchase patterns or usage or whatever. And they're separating that monetization from their products. And so what ends up happening is you start building a lot of things, and then you start to say, well, what should we price this at? And then it turns out it's not that valuable. And so you put all this work in it, and you haven't added any value to your business. So you want to be thinking early on in that product strategy, okay, what is it we should do that's going to add value, that has some willingness to pay to go with it? There's going to be some things you need to do just to make your product better over time. But if you're going to have a robust strategy, it needs to be, how are we going to add value to our consumer in ways that we can also charge more? Otherwise, your business is forever going to be charging for the same thing you've got now, and you're just trying to find more customers. That's how you get out of just the always trying to acquire. You want to acquire and develop, and that's how you do a lot of that.
Let me ask you about like VCs, private equity, that sort of stuff. Those types of companies are looking for things that are specific about a company in order to have a vehicle that they can invest in. How does your company help these other developing companies to become something that a VC is going to be interested in, or that they can get some private equity if that's what they're looking for?
Yeah, we've worked with some of the companies that are in that space as well, and usually it's that they're building a machine, if you will, that has all the right pieces to be able to scale. And what's different about that and like a forever founder-led company, I mean, founders are amazing, and it's I think some of the people I admire most. But what ends up happening is it requires different skill sets to get from different phases of growth. So if someone's thinking about it in terms of, this is always my business and I'm going to play the role I've always played, that becomes really challenging for it to be attractive as, because you can never extract that person out of the business and have it operate as a business. It's kind of an extension of them. But it is, to the extent that they're thinking about it as, okay, how am I going to get the best people in here to be able to run different parts of my organization? Is my best role at this point to be leading the whole company, or do I lead a section of the company? For instance, some founders are brilliant at product. And I've worked with a lot of them where over time, and when they get acquired by PE, they play a role leading product or leading sales or leading marketing or something like that. That's truly the area where they're brilliant. And they need to play a different role than what they did as the solopreneur or founder, and starting to gear your business to operate like something that lives in the PE or VC realm. Needs to be a professionalized business. And that's often, if you look at the playbook that a lot of the PEs and VCs run, especially on the PE side, is they're going to come in and say, how do we professionalize these different functions of the business? Because when it's run by an extension of a founder, there's usually some huge opportunities. One of the first places they'll look is, how strong is the sales force? Are they professionally trained? Are these people with really strong backgrounds? And how do we get the right people into these seats so that this is maximizing its potential versus kind of the potential of what it had from the original crew.
When you're working with companies, how do you measure the success in your pricing or product strategies? Like, how do you measure it in the short term? How do you measure it in the long term?
Yeah, super important. So in the short term, obviously revenue growth plays a big role. No one's looking to pull the pricing lever and have the revenue go down. The intent is to say, how can we grow the business? One of the we want to be able to grow the volume, but we want to make each unit of volume more valuable. So revenue is going to be a big piece of that. Profitability comes. I mean, if you think about, you sell the same unit, you sold at $10 now at 15 or 12.50, whatever it is, that difference in price drops straight to the bottom line because your costs haven't changed. So that's super attractive there. But what you also end up having, let's say you're looking at a software company, net revenue retention is a big part of that. So, of your ability to expand the existing base and bring in new logos, all those things are important in terms of how are you growing the long-term metrics like customer lifetime value and revenue retention is two that we're looking at all the time. And ultimately, those are big things that a PE or VC is going to be looking at as well.
Pat, so much information. I know we fire hosed a lot of people here on this one, but if people want to reach out, they want to get more information for their particular business in general, they want to have a conversation with you about what it is that they're up to, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can just send me an email at patrick.meegan@maplestreet.com, or you can just find me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk with people, regardless of the size of the company or what your questions are. Often talking with people and just kind of seeing what their issues are and if there's a fit.
Perfect. Pat, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, look, you are in business to make a profit. That's just the bottom line. If you're not in business to make a profit, I don't know what you're doing. It's probably something else. So if you're looking to do something successful, you are going to want to work with people who are already doing that and finding those profit margins. Sometimes it just has to do with how you're presenting your product or service. So you're going to want to reach out to people like Pat. Make sure you stop by the website. It's maplestreet.com, scrolling across the bottom, maplestreet.com, and have that conversation, because if you plan on growing your company, especially in some inflationary periods, You need to start showing the value to the customer so that they're willing to pay what you're worth. And sometimes it just takes an outside view to help you get there. MapleStreet.com. Pat, thank you very much for being on the program today. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. And we're out.
It's over. Go home.
Is your business in need of marketing? Try starting a podcast. But not just any podcast. Podcast like a pro. We can show you how to take your business from being invisible to becoming a brand people trust. Go to www.businessbros.biz to get started today.